Yo soy Lolita Lebron, presidenta del Partido Nacionalista de Puerto Rico, exprisionera política de los Estados Unidos. Soy la que dirigió el ataque al Congreso de los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica el 1 de marzo de 1954 en defensa de la liberación del pueblo de Puerto Rico.
El 1 de noviembre de 1950, dos nacionalistas puertorriqueños, Griselio Torresola y Oscar Collazo, tirotearon la Casa Blair, residencia del presidente Truman en Washington. Este ataque era parte de la revolución proindependencia que se desarrollaba en la isla. El 1 de marzo de 1954, 4 nacionalistas puertorriqueños tirotearon el Congreso de los Estados Unidos para llevar a un nivel internacional la lucha por la liberación del pueblo puertorriqueño. Los medios de comunicación de los Estados Unidos presentaron los incidentes como actos de fanáticos o criminales. Estos dos ataques armados constituyen para los nacionalistas acciones de valor y sacrificio supremo por parte de patriotas.
This is the chamber of the House of Representatives within a few moments after it was emptied, still showing the aftermath of the wild hail of bullets by fanatic Puerto Rican nationalists. Outside the Capitol, hospital and emergency units quickly mobilized to care for the 5 wounded congressmen cut down in the fantastic sudden shooting. Very seriously hurt is Representative Alvin Bentley of Michigan. Also hit by the flying bullets are Congressman Ben Jensen of Iowa, Clifford Davis of Tennessee, Kenneth Roberts of Alabama, and George Fallon of Maryland. Even as the stricken 5 are rushed away to hospitals, observers regarded a miracle that more were not hurt in the crowded chamber by maniacs firing at close range. Under heavy guard are the would-be assassins, Mrs. Lolita Lebron, who boldly claims she's instigator of the murder plot. Seized with her in the visitors' gallery, Andrew Cardero. Another who brazenly sprayed bullets an unsuspecting congressman is Rafael Miranda. A 4th member of their group evaded capture in the House chamber. He's Irving Flores, arrested soon after the attack in a Washington bus terminal.
Mr. Gandhi, do you agree that the way to gain independence for Puerto Rico is to go around shooting American congressmen?
The nationalist movement of Puerto Rico is a movement that for many than 25 years has been demanded in all international congresses and all international bodies the recognition of independence of Puerto Rico.
If you shoot to kill or to wound?
Did you shoot to kill the persons in the Congress?
Not to kill.
What was the purpose of the shooting?
Purpose of the shooting was in a clamor of freedom for my country.
Well, miss, can you tell us whose idea this was?
Not that. It's my idea and our idea, the 4 of us idea.
How long were you in planning this, sir? Can you tell us?
I saw it. I don't know. It's not too necessary to answer to my country. To gain something from my country, I saw that not necessary to answer.
Are you sorry to shut these 5 congressmen?
I'm not sorry of what I did. I'm not sorry.
How about you, Miss LeBron?
I am not sorry.
What'd you say, miss?
I'm not sorry to come and ask freedom for my country any place.
Como los ejemplos que nosotros dimos, como que en Puerto Rico también hay diferentes...
Where there are different revolutionary groups in Puerto Rico that are ready to use arms when that becomes necessary. Puerto Rico is being prepared for revolution, armed revolution.
me amarran las manos, me callan la boca, me pegan de palos, pero no me tocan. Saben que he aprendido la sucia verdad, que a mi Puerto Rico lo van a explotar. Puerto Rico, te siento en mi sangre.
Lolita Lebron, a controversial figure on the Puerto Rican political scene, is known above all for her armed attack, together with 3 Puerto Rican compatriots, on the Congress of the United States, the 1st of March, 1954. Born in Lares, the cradle of Puerto Rican nationalism, the daughter of workers, from childhood she absorbed the rebellious spirit of Pedro Albizu Campos against the oppressive structures of foreign domination. Raised at the same time in the Christian tradition, she would combine her religious belief with a revolutionary fervor unique in the history of the Americas. Pardoned in September 1979,
on March 1st, 1954, Lolita Lebron, Rafael Miranda, Irving Flores, and Andre Cordero stood in the visitors' gallery at the House of Representatives in Washington. They unfurled the Puerto Rican flag and shouted, "Puerto Rico is not free." Then, taking out handguns, they shot directly into the chamber below, wounding 5 congressmen. They were arrested immediately. Lolita Lebron has been in jail for 23 years. Conrad Lynn was her lawyer in Washington, and then later in New York, where she and many other nationalist leaders were tried for conspiracy.
My defense was basically that this was a dramatic act of protest which was justified because of the illegality of the occupation of Puerto Rico by the United States. The nationalists believed that the United States was illegally in Puerto Rico, and they never recognized the sovereignty of the United States government. Therefore, a nationalist, such as Lolita Lebron, and specifically Lolita Lebron, even though she was suffering from lack of a job, and therefore she did not have an opportunity to have food for herself and her child that was with her in Brooklyn, she refused to accept relief. And therefore, life was very harsh for her.
Lolita was a follower of Don Pedro Albizu Campos.
Albizu Campos had said that in the Jones Act, passed by Congress, 1917, we had the legal enslavement of the Puerto Rican people, the death of their dreams of independence. This was an act of the American Congress. It is true that the president signed the law, but it was the debate in the Congress that specifically had come to his attention, and it was at that time the last or one of the later expressions of the concept of manifest destiny, that the United States had been called by God from 1898 on to rule over these people who were the lesser breeds. And it recalled to mind Rudyard Kipling's poem, which had been first published in the United States, The White Man's Burden. And so this is what was in the mind of Albizu and in the mind of Lolita. There was an insult to the Puerto Rican people expressed, not simply political domination. It was the insult. The Puerto Rican people are an amalgam of peoples, Indian, blacks, and whites. And when Kipling talked about lesser breeds without the law, he's talking about these so-called half-breeds. And it was an insult and impugning of their racial heritage that was instinct in what she was trying to avenge by that deed, not just the act to obtain Puerto Rican independence. It was a reply to a national humiliation. When Albizu made his great speech at Fajardo in December 1949, that's when he made the greatest expression of what you were just talking about, this matter that you must be ready to sacrifice your lives. He made the whole assembly stand and take the oath that we will advance over the bones of Albizu, if necessary, in order to win our independence. In other words, they were all ready to make the sacrifice that Albizu would make, which would be his life. See, so therefore it is absolutely true that they believed in the necessity of valor and sacrifice. At the time of the uprising in 1950, 5 nationalists assaulted the governor's palace. He was surrounded by troops, a whole company of troops with machine guns, and 5 felt called upon to assault the governor's palace, just 5 men, and they were all riddled with bullets, of course, before they got to the steps of the governor's palace. But they were the nationalists. They felt they had to make that sacrifice. It was a symbolic attempt to end the rule of the representative of American imperialism. See, that was the way the nationalists looked at it. Now, of course, as the Puerto Ricans say now, and many Puerto Ricans I know, that man asked for too much. You can't have a race that consists only of heroes. That's not possible.
So, but that certainly was something that Lolita.
Oh yes. Oh, she represented that. She represented exactly that point of view. See, and that, of course, is her main danger to the American hegemony, because Lolita is such an inspiring figure that. I can understand the government not being too anxious to let her out. Now, for example, when she went to the funeral of her older daughter, who died in an automobile accident, I believe it was, they let her go to attend the funeral in Puerto Rico. Now, they could have let her stay there. But I suppose they had second thoughts and brought her back to the prison because she had received such a reception in Puerto Rico. There would be a complete renovation of the nationalist spirit if they had left Lolita there. She wouldn't have had to do much except be there.
Do you think she's changed at all since she's been in prison?
Oh no, she has simply her conviction of the rightness of her cause has simply been deepened, that's all.
55 years of confinement, characterized by an unshakable personal commitment to her patriotic ideals, Lolita Lebron has immersed herself anew in the struggle for the dignity and independence of her homeland.
You're from Lares, aren't you? Yes, I'm from Lares, where the cry of independence was given. That's right. How did you get from Lares to the Congress in Washington, D.C. in 1954? Well, as you might imagine, following the path of freedom. Yes, but the development of your political awareness, more or less, how did it start? Well, the experience of being a Puerto Rican woman from working-class families where there was so much repression and so much oppression. From there, I developed a capacity, a sense of the needs, of how to resolve the problems of the community. And above everything else, through Don Pedro Albizu Campos, having heard from him about the Ponce massacre and other events in the history of the struggle for national liberation, things that one always heard about. Did you know Don Pedro personally? Personally, no. However, when people ask me if I knew Don Pedro, I always say yes, because I don't believe I have ever known a better human being than Don Pedro, unless it was my mother. Do you come from a large family or small? We could say I come from a large family. Basically farmers? Yes. Now, there are many professionals now. But my father was from a landed family, although for a variety of reasons, he had to separate himself from that social state due to marital difficulties. He became more of a laborer. What were the circumstances in which you joined the Nationalist Party? Well, I swore allegiance to the fatherland under the guidance of Don Pedro Albizu Campos. I was living in New York at the time. Coming back to the Nationalist Party, can you say something about the ideology? The ideology of the Nationalist Party derives from the nationalist roots, set down by the father of the country, Don Ramon Emeterio Betances, father, too, of our Declaration of Independence. We stand, therefore, for the right to our own nationality. Nationalism in Puerto Rico represents the purest essence of the Puerto Rican nation. Was this a socialist independence? Or just independence? That's where you're mistaken. Don Pedro Albizu Campos is a man of such human and intellectual dimension that he could not conceive of a fatherland without social justice. Moreover, Don Pedro was one of the leaders of the social struggle in Puerto Rico, in the sense that he was the one who represented the workers in the cane strikes in the 1930s. Nevertheless, Don Pedro's idea was first and foremost the need to free Puerto Rico from the presence of foreign invaders and colonizers like the United States, and that once a republic had been created, the people of Puerto Rico would determine and define their political philosophy according to the democratic will of the people. Not like other peoples who are trapped in a neo-colony. We've never believed in the freedom that exists in Latin America and other parts of the world, what we call neocolonialism. We believe it's impossible to be really free if there's no social justice. We do not consider independence in itself to be liberation, but we call it liberation because it's the principal yoke we bear, the presence there of an invasion of a foreign power in Puerto Rico. Clearly, this is the most important basis for liberation, the establishing of people's independence. You were speaking earlier about your trip to Cuba, and apparently you were quite impressed. Is it your understanding that in order for there to be social justice in Puerto Rico, it will be necessary to follow more or less the path that Cuba pursued in 1959? I believe that Puerto Rico will have its own Puerto Rican republic, that every situation is itself unique, that we can learn much from Cuba, and that we must fight, should it be necessary, as it very obviously is. As for what kind of republic to establish in Puerto Rico, I believe it should be a socialist republic. But we also have a right to contribute not only to the definition of socialism, but to the practice of socialism as well, with our own ideas. For example, socialism in Cuba is different from partisan socialism in Puerto Rico. I really like Cuba's socialism. Socialist currents in Puerto Rico are conflictive, too conflictive. This is something we have to work on. If we can become like Cuba in a social and intellectual sense, that would be magnificent, for Cuba is a country that has developed enormously in the areas of education, health, the economy, many areas. It's a lesson for the entire world. Yes, I'm very favorably impressed. I can even say I was overwhelmed by Cuba. But what I most liked about Cuba was the humanity that emanates from the people, their sense of collectivism and family, the education that's so perceptible there, the intellectual development of the children, the sense of community, the recognition of work and of the worker. Cuba is a nation of workers, a vanguard nation with its own politics. Cuba has a politics quite its own. There are many things in Cuba that we could call traditionalist, like that great sense of honor Cubans have toward women. There are many things there we do not find alien because they're so much a part of us. Indeed, we're exceedingly proud of Cuba. Changing realities completely. What impressed you the most when you returned to Puerto Rico for the first time after being away 25 years? What impressed me the most? Yes, because obviously in 25 years many things changed. In Puerto Rico? Yes. Puerto Rico, as I already said, gives the appearance of progress. But that in itself must have been quite impressive, extremely impressive. I recognize that progress. But in trying to penetrate it, one finds it empty. Nevertheless, we could make use of it for the Republic of Puerto Rico, since we wouldn't have to build many houses, because we already have a lot. We have roads, great physical beauty, architecture. There are many buildings. The country's beautiful. It's always been a beautiful country. And if we look at it, it was more beautiful in times gone by when agriculture hadn't suffered so much, for we have a lot of cement, much housing, many lights, many cars, many industries, many corporations. The people look good. They seem to be healthier, too. Indeed, Puerto Rico gives the impression that you're in the United States, that you're in New York. That's impressive. But you know, it doesn't impress me very much, because I look to the roots of things, and I see that this progress has done us much harm. We could also say that there's something positive in this progress, but it isn't used at all positively. Rather, it's negative, because all stimulus for the people of Puerto Rico to be themselves has been cut off. It's a country paralyzed, excepting, of course, for the liberation movement. So, progress aside, you feel that basically the condition of Puerto Rico hasn't changed since the time when you left? No, not in the most essential things. The colonial situation hasn't changed? Now it's really difficult. It's more difficult now than ever before to free Puerto Rico. In what way? A people with so much material comfort. It's difficult to tell people they must give up much of that comfort and that they must make sacrifices. Before, it wasn't that way, because the people were so needy. They had no food, they were sick. It's not like that now. But you also seem to give the impression that this progress doesn't really belong to them, in the sense it's really an imported progress. If we were free, we would have that progress and something better, I believe. We could arrive at that. What I'm saying is, the price we've paid for that transitory material progress, we're not interested in that. Our interest is to see the country free, sovereign, and independent, forging its own destiny. growing, developing,
un país con dignidad.
a country with national dignity. And I don't know where that national dignity is, if not, for example, in these comrades who are now in prison, in all those others who have died and are buried, and all those who are moved to bring about the independence of Puerto Rico, and who do so with honesty and sincerity. That's national dignity.
Saquen esas bombas atómicas del medio del mundo, que ustedes se las dieron al mundo, y después que se las dieron, no, yo le voy a decir a ustedes, voy a terminar ya, no quisiera que en mi país nadie me tuviera que mandar a callar por defender la libertad de mi país, y ella no se ha encontrado todavía. Señores, no hay odio, no hay nada, solamente lo que hay es el derecho y el deber de un pueblo a ser libre, y nada trabajará aquí, nada más que la liberación total y plena del pueblo de Puerto Rico. Muchas gracias.
Ustedes tienen y van a ser libres y soberanos y van a regir sus propios destinos, porque ustedes son inmensos, son hermosos, son capaces, son inteligentes, son buenos, son serviciales, son algo muy infinito de la gracia de Dios. Así que tenemos los puertorriqueños que sentirnos orgullosos de que no somos, y no hay nadie mejor que nosotros sobre la faz de la tierra, ni más hermoso que nosotros, ni más capaz que nosotros. No hay nada que no podamos alcanzar. Sin embargo, yo les llamo a que busquemos siempre, como en esta noche, a excepción de lo que han hecho para decirme a mí que soy importante, que busquemos en nosotros nuestro mejor ser. Y yo les digo a ustedes que ya hubiésemos sido libres hace mucho tiempo. Desgraciadamente, no todos buscan su mejor ser. Y muchos líderes nuestros, o personas con autoridad para crear conciencia nacional, envenenan la mente y la conciencia y el espíritu y el corazón de muchos puertorriqueños que son débiles en algún momento, o que están confundidos, o que son personas que se han olvidado que el chisme y el atentar contra la dignidad de nuestro prójimo y el querer hacer de unos de nosotros unos parias o unos desgraciados, porque algunos de nosotros estamos en posiciones que el pueblo nos escucha a través de la radio y de la prensa y de los medios de comunicación. Señores, y cuando yo escucho eso, ¡qué desgracia! ¡Qué desgracia! Que no estemos unidos, que no hayamos hecho más y más y más para acercarnos a la alborada de la libertad, porque perdemos el tiempo, porque oímos a fulano y a sutano a través de la radio y la televisión y de algunos medios, otros de la prensa, hablando mal de uno y del otro, que es un líder o que es una persona que se ha dedicado a la causa, que ha hecho lo más que ha podido y que es un hermano. Y ese hermano nosotros lo queremos hundir y la causa se retrasa, se achica y camina de rodillas, porque se le ha dado tanta importancia a esas personas que han querido siempre mantener dividida la causa de la liberación nacional, para que no seamos libres. Ellos inconscientemente son servidores de la colonia y del gobierno de los Estados Unidos, por más patriotas que les suenen uno de nosotros a través de la radio y de la televisión y de los periódicos. Ese es dolorosamente e inconscientemente un traidor.